Ladies and gentlemen, the moment you stop chasing love is the moment it starts chasing you. And when it does, it comes back stronger, clearer, and more intentional than ever before. When you choose yourself, you stop pausing your life in hopes that someone else will validate your worth. You begin to understand that your happiness, growth, and fulfillment are not dependent on whether a particular person texts you back, stays in your life, or finally sees what you've always offered. Choosing yourself means waking up every day and committing to creating a life that feels meaningful, with or without anyone else's permission or presence. This doesn't mean you shut people out or give up on love. It means you stop placing your life on hold for the possibility of love. You stop waiting by your phone. You stop scrolling their feed, hoping to find signs that they still care. Instead, you pour your energy in the places where it matters most: in your goals, your health, your friendships, your creativity, your peace. You stop performing your life for the hope that someone will notice, and you start actually living it. Choosing yourself is about emotional responsibility. You stop outsourcing your joy and start building it from within. You no longer allow your mood to rise or fall based on someone else's presence or absence. If they leave, you don't collapse. You reset, you honor the grief, but you don't let it rob you of your own future. You make plans. You say yes to opportunities. You book that trip. You take the class. You read the book you've been putting off. You move forward. You don't wait for closure or clarity that may never come. You give it to yourself. When you choose yourself, you no longer try to fill the silence with desperate noise. You allow space. You stop chasing someone just to avoid the discomfort of being alone. You learn to sit with your own presence. And then you learn to enjoy it. You fill your space with what lights you up, not with the temporary thrill of being wanted. You begin to experience your own value, not just as a partner, but as a whole person. You build a life that reflects your standards, your rhythm, your joy. You surround yourself with people who energize you, not just those you hope will eventually choose you. You invest in your growth, not in fixing someone else's inability to meet you where you are. You recognize that the more alive and aligned you become, the more clearly you see what truly deserves a place in your world, and what doesn't. Choosing yourself is not a rejection of others, it's a return to self-respect. It's refusing to let unreturned affection shrink your potential. It's realizing that time spent waiting for someone who's unsure about you is time stolen from the version of you that's already sure of who you're becoming. It's about trusting that what's meant for you won't require begging, proving, or shrinking. And when you live like this, when you commit to yourself, honor your time, and protect your energy, something subtle but powerful happens. Your energy shifts. You become grounded, radiant, self-sufficient. You stop attracting people who feed off your neediness and start drawing in those who respect your wholeness. You become a mirror. And sometimes, the very person you once longed for begins to see what they missed. Not because you waited, but because you didn't. Living a full life without waiting is the evidence of self-worth in action. It's not a strategy to get someone back. It's the freedom that comes when you realize you were never supposed to put your life on hold for anyone who wasn't choosing you already. When you choose yourself, setting boundaries without apology becomes second nature. You no longer feel the need to explain or justify the lines you draw, because you understand that your emotional well-being is not up for negotiation. Boundaries stop being a tool to control others or test their loyalty, and instead become a reflection of your self-respect. You don't set them to push people away. You set them to protect your peace, your energy, and your standards. When you choose yourself, you start listening to your instincts. You notice when something feels off. You trust your discomfort. You no longer dismiss those quiet moments where you feel unseen, unheard, or taken for granted. Instead of swallowing your truth to keep the peace, you speak it calmly and clearly. You say no without flinching. You don't over-explain. You don't soften the blow by sugarcoating your truth. You recognize that protecting your emotional space is more important than being liked in every moment. Choosing yourself means you stop letting guilt run your decisions. You understand that saying no to someone else doesn't make you unkind. It makes you clear. It means you value your time and emotional availability. You no longer say yes to things that drain you, just to avoid disappointing someone. You'd rather be respected for your honesty than praised for your compliance. You no longer entertain connections that thrive only when you're constantly giving while receiving little in return. You stop rewarding inconsistency with access. If someone disappears and reappears when it suits them, you don't call it chemistry. You call it a pattern. You stop answering texts at midnight from someone who couldn't find time for you at noon. You don't entertain emotional crumbs when you're capable of building a whole table. You recognize that the more you tolerate, the more you teach someone how little they need to show up. So instead, you teach by action. When your boundary is crossed, you step back, not out of spite but from clarity. Boundaries become a filter, not a wall. You don't shut people out. You just stop letting the wrong ones in. You become selective about who gets access to your softness, your time, your vulnerability. You realize that not everyone deserves a seat at your table, even if they once had one. You're not angry about it. You're just awake. You understand that someone else's reaction to your boundary isn't your responsibility. If they get upset because you're no longer available for the version of the relationship that only served them, that's not a sign to reconsider. It's a sign the boundary is working. When you choose yourself, you shift from pleasing to honoring. You stop asking, will they still like me if I say this? And start asking, will I still like myself if I don't? You don't bend in every direction just to avoid rejection. You don't make excuses for someone's repeated inability to meet your needs. You don't rationalize red flags because you're afraid of being alone. You hold yourself to a higher standard, and in doing so, you require others to rise or step aside. Choosing yourself means understanding that boundaries are not ultimatums. They are invitations, an invitation for others to meet you where you are, and for you to stand firm in who you've become. You don't issue warnings or threats. You don't wait for them to get it. You make the boundary clear, and then you align your actions with it. You stop rescuing people from the consequences of their behavior. You let them feel the space their choices create. This is what it means to set boundaries without apology. It's not hard-heartedness. It's wholeness. It's what happens when you decide that your peace is more important than someone else's comfort with your silence, your strength, or your standards. When you choose yourself, you stop feeling the need to always be available to prove your worth. You no longer seek responsiveness as a measure of love or loyalty. Instead, you embrace the quiet power of mystery. You allow space. You understand that being emotionally accessible does not mean being endlessly available. You recognize that being constantly reachable, constantly explaining, and constantly engaging doesn't create deeper connection. It creates emotional exhaustion and erodes your personal magnetism. Choosing yourself teaches you the strength of restraint. You don't rush to reply the second your phone buzzes. You don't feel obligated to share every detail of your day, every thought in your head, or every feeling in your heart with someone who hasn't earned that level of intimacy. You learn to enjoy your own presence first. You're not ignoring others. You're prioritizing your own rhythm. You're not ghosting. You're grounding. Your energy is no longer scattered in pursuit of someone else's attention. It's held, contained, and intentional. You understand that mystery isn't about withholding. It's about self-containment. You don't offer everything up front. You allow things to unfold. You let curiosity grow instead of trying to satisfy it immediately. You stop filling silences just to avoid discomfort. You allow someone else the opportunity to wonder, to think, to reach, to miss you. That space isn't manipulation. It's maturity. You no longer mistake constant validation for real connection. You let your presence speak for itself even in your absence. When you choose yourself, your time becomes sacred. You no longer jump into conversations just because someone decided now is convenient for them. You don't keep your schedule empty just in case they want to see you. You make plans that feed your life. You allow people to fit into your world instead of allowing your world to revolve around theirs. You don't cancel on yourself to show up for someone who wouldn't do the same. You understand that what's consistent and healthy isn't urgent. It's internal. You stop being predictable, not because you're trying to be elusive, but because you're no longer performing availability for approval. Your mystery comes from your movement, how you invest in your passions, how you protect your emotional space, how you carry yourself without needing external reassurance. You become the person whose attention is felt because it's rare, not because it's endless. You're not trying to impress with volume. You're letting your energy speak in silence. Choosing yourself also means protecting your emotional depth. You don't offer deep vulnerability to someone who's only giving surface-level effort. You stop telling your whole story to someone who hasn't earned your trust. You save your soul for those who create safe spaces for it. That mystery, the emotional kind, is what keeps relationships rich and alive. You share, but you don't spill. You express, but you don't overexpose. You communicate, but you don't confess to be chosen. You recognize that true connection thrives when both people show up fully, not when one is constantly pouring and the other simply receiving. You wait to see if someone matches your energy. You no longer reward intermittent interest with full availability. You allow attraction to build through presence and absence, through showing and stepping back, through clarity and restraint. You're no longer addicted to being seen. You're grounded in your own visibility. Mystery, when rooted in self-worth, becomes effortless. You don't chase attention, you attract it. You don't manage perceptions. You embody confidence. You let someone earn access over time, through consistency, not charm. And the more you choose yourself, the less you feel the need to be everywhere for everyone. Your mystery becomes your protection. Your boundaries become your power. Your absence, when felt, speaks louder than any forced performance of presence ever could. When you choose yourself, walking away when it's not enough becomes a clear decision rather than a painful guessing game. You no longer cling to the hope that someone will change, step up, or finally see your worth. You no longer stay because of how much time you've invested, how much potential you saw, or how good it could be, if only. You see things as they are, not as you wish they were. And when what you see doesn't align with your needs, you walk, not to prove a point, not to make them chase you, magnetic, but because your peace matters more than potential. Choosing yourself means you stop measuring your worth by someone else's ability to love you well. You realize that being loyal to the wrong person is a betrayal of your own growth. You no longer make excuses for disrespect or inconsistency. You stop telling yourself that crumbs are a meal just because you're afraid of being alone. You understand that being alone with your dignity is far more powerful than staying connected to someone who can't meet you with the same depth, presence, and effort you offer. When you choose yourself, you stop staying in situations that make you feel small. You stop rationalizing patterns that drain you emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. You recognize that love isn't supposed to feel like waiting. It isn't supposed to feel like proving. It isn't supposed to feel like confusion dressed up as chemistry. If you have to constantly shrink yourself, censor your truth, or carry the emotional weight of the entire relationship just to keep things going, then you already know it's not enough. Walking away becomes an act of self-alignment. You stop debating whether your standards are too high. You stop asking people to give you what should be freely offered. You realize that the right connection won't need convincing, chasing, or justifying. You stop trying to be understood by someone who's not even listening. You stop holding on to the version of them you created in your head and start paying attention to the version they keep showing you. Choosing yourself also means taking your power back from the idea that must come from someone else. You give yourself the closure they couldn't or wouldn't offer. You close the chapter with your own hands, knowing that waiting for them to explain, change, or apologize only keeps you stuck. You stop seeking answers that won't change the reality you're living in. You let go not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring more about your own well-being. You begin to see walking away not as a failure, but as a success in self-awareness. You learn to detach with grace instead of bitterness. You don't need to burn the bridge or prove your pain. You just choose not to cross it anymore. You learn that silence can be louder than any goodbye. That disappearing from someone's life can be the most powerful boundary you ever set. That the one who walks away with their self-respect intact is never the one who loses. When you choose yourself, you stop asking what they think of you and start asking what you think of anything. You stop wondering if they'll miss you and start reflecting on how long you've missed yourself in their presence. You stop fantasizing about them coming back better and start imagining your life moving forward stronger. You walk away not out of anger, but out of clarity. Not out of revenge, but out of remembrance of your own worth. Agnet, and each step you take away from what isn't enough brings you closer to what is. When you choose yourself, you no longer offer your love as a bargain. You stop presenting it like a limited time deal to someone who hasn't earned it. You recognize that your time, your affection, your energy, your loyalty, these are valuable. They're not to be handed out freely to anyone who shows interest. They are a privilege, and only those who show up with consistency, respect, and integrity get access to them. You stop overgiving in hopes that someone will finally value you. You begin to realize that giving more to someone who gives less never creates balance. It only creates burnout. You stop trying to prove your worth by being overly generous with your heart. You stop thinking that loving harder will make someone love you better. You recognize that your love isn't something to be earned by tolerating mistreatment, inconsistency, or emotional unavailability. You no longer accept emotional scraps because you're afraid of starting over. Instead, you raise your standards and trust that those who are truly meant for you will rise to meet them. Choosing yourself means understanding that you are not here to be convenient. You are not here to be someone's temporary fix, their emotional safety net, or their backup plan. You don't need to make yourself smaller to fit into someone's limited capacity. You don't need to suppress your needs just to be more easy to love. You understand that anyone who truly values you won't be scared off by your standards. They'll be motivated by them. You don't water yourself down for the comfort of others. You remain grounded and firm in who you are. You stop rewarding inconsistency with deeper access. Magnetic. When someone shows you they're not ready for the type of love you're offering, you believe them. You don't try to change them. You don't try to heal them. You don't try to show them that you're different from everyone else. You understand that love is not a rescue mission. Your heart is not a rehab center for emotionally unavailable people. You're not here to convince someone to appreciate what they couldn't see the first time. You're not here to offer second, third, or 10th chances because you believe in their potential. You believe in yourself more. Choosing yourself shifts the way you date, the way you connect to invest. You begin to ask better questions. Does this person add to my peace? Do they make me feel seen, safe, and respected? Do they deserve access to me? You stop romanticizing intensity and start looking for consistency. You stop mistaking chaos for passion. You begin to understand that real love is steady, clear, and reciprocal. It doesn't make you question your worth. It confirms it. You no longer offer your love to people just because they're persistent or charming. You start requiring substance. You want someone who shows up with effort, not just empty promises. Someone who listens, not just responds. Someone who values your presence, not just your availability. And if they don't, you walk. Not because you're cold, but because you're no longer willing to be discounted just to feel chosen. You become selective. Not bitter, not closed off, just discerning. You recognize that your love is powerful, healing, and rare. You understand that the right person won't require you to shrink, chase, or settle. And until they show up, you are content pouring that love back into yourself, your purpose, and the people who show you they value it. You stop begging for reciprocity. You start expecting it as the baseline. Because when you choose yourself, you finally treat your love like the treasure it's always been. When you choose yourself, you realize that the ultimate win is not get them to come back, apologize, or change. It's recognizing that your worth was never tied to their ability to value you. You stop waiting for validation from someone who couldn't see you clearly in the first place. You stop seeing their return as proof that you were lovable all along. Instead, you begin to see that the most powerful thing you can do is to remember who you are, regardless of who chooses you. You stop chasing closure and start building confidence. You no longer need someone to finish the story for you, or explain why they couldn't show up for you the way you deserved. You learn that their inability to meet you where you are has nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with their own limitations. You don't take it personally anymore. You stop wondering what you could have done better and start focusing on what you did do right. By staying, by loving fully, and then, by walking away. Choosing yourself shifts your focus from outcome to alignment. You no longer see winning as getting the guy, or fixing the relationship. You understand that the real win is never abandoning yourself again, just to hold on to someone who couldn't hold you. It's not about proving to them that you were enough. It's about knowing it so deeply that you no longer need anyone else to confirm it. When you choose yourself, self-worth stops being a concept and becomes a lived practice. You start checking in with yourself before saying yes to someone else. You stop ignoring red flags in the name of potential. You set standards and stick to them, not to play games or test people, but because your peace, your emotional safety, and your dignity are non-negotiable. You begin to honor your needs without guilt. You begin to see your own heart as something valuable, something that must be handled with care. You no longer see rejection as a reflection of your lack, but as redirection. When something or someone doesn't work out, you don't spiral into self-blame. You allow yourself to grieve, but you don't let that grief turn into self-doubt. You've learned that not every connection is meant to last, and not every lesson comes wrapped in kindness. You stop needing every chapter to have a romantic resolution. Sometimes, the resolution is you deciding not to lower your standards just to avoid being alone. You begin to celebrate your growth instead of mourning the people who didn't grow with you. You realize that the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself. When that relationship is strong, you stop giving your power away to people who can't handle it. You become less reactive, more grounded. You're no longer swayed by mixed signals or emotional highs and lows. You know what you offer, and you don't feel the need to convince anyone of it. Self-worth becomes the filter through which you view every relationship. It's the reason you no longer chase. It's the reason you don't text just to feel close. It's the reason you walk away when it's not enough. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring more about yourself. You realize that if someone comes back and you no longer want them, that's not a loss. That's proof of how much you've grown. When you choose yourself, you understand that love is never about convincing someone to see your value. It's about choosing people who already do. And in the end, whether they return or not, whether they get it or not, whether they regret losing you or not, none of it defines you. The real win is that you finally stopped waiting for them to.